Judging by the way that people post on social media, it would be really easy for us to think that no one experiences failures or mistakes in their own personal life. But you and I both know that that could not be furthest from the truth, because the reality of life is that at some point all of us have failed, all of us will fail, or some of us are currently failing at the present moment. Because failures and mistakes are something that does not discriminate. All of us will experience it at some point. And so it is so important for us to learn how to overcome the failures and move on past our failures once we encounter them. That is why on the 5th episode of proFAITHsional Favor, I share the story of how I failed most recently as it relates to my career. Upon listening to the 5th episode of proFAITHsional Favor, you're going to find how it took me 10 years, 10 whole years to pursue my dream job and to finally get it. So after 10 years of pursuing my perfect and dream job, I got it. But it only took me 6 months to resign. And the conditions of resigning from this job, obviously there were some low moments. There were some frustrating moments, because not everything was color roses, obviously. And then there were things that were frustrating. There were things that both sides, I believe, we encountered that it was kind of like, oh, how do we deal with this, you know? And so, but listening to the episode, I want you to pay really close attention to how I speak about that particular experience. And you will notice two things when you listen to the episode. Number one is that on the way to getting my perfect job, there were a couple of other failures that I had to deal with and I had to toil with. Something that I don't necessarily say in the episode is that when I was looking for a job in Arizona, really this was right after I graduated from grad school. So I had a job offer, which I rejected, which, yes, that was a failure on my part because I didn't really discern at that time that that's what I was supposed to do, or at least I didn't want to do that at the time. But doing that, what it caused is for a whole year, I went without a job, and I was chasing after the dream job. And in doing so, I spent all of my savings, like literally spent my savings. And so then, in that whole period, then there were a lot of things that transpired, a lot of things that I had to kind of deal with, and a lot of things that I had to learn how to mentally work through. Because the first thing that we're going to be tempted to think once we experience failure, we fail at something, is that we must deal with the idea that failure is not destiny. Like, failure is not identity. Failure is a process. And so that might be the hardest thing for you to either realize or to deal with, is how do you, in the midst of what you're going through, in the midst of what you are experiencing, how can you separate your identity from the process of the failure? Because those two things are different. They're not one and the same. They will collide and coincide, but they're not the same. You are not your failure. The failure is only a process. And so it's important to know how to overcome it. The second thing you will notice when you listen to the episode is that I chose a very specific way to talk about this experience. Number one, I do not, and I do my best not to identify the organization that I work for. And number two, I do my best not to identify the people that I work with. And the job that I was doing was very, very visible. It was public within that organization, so a lot of people had eyes on it. But and so anybody that could be listening to the episode or watching this video can kind of identify themselves within the story. And so it was very important for me to say that I appreciate you and that I love you. So I chose not to disclose. The other thing was that I wanted to do my best to share in a positive light, not only because I'm encouraging whoever you that is watching or will listen to the episode, but I also, or have heard the episode, but I also wanted to make sure that I was honoring a principle that I found in the Bible. And it is from the book of Jeremiah in chapter 15. In chapter 15, it's finally when Jeremiah gets to the point where he is like venting to God. He's like, oh my gosh, I cannot take it anymore. Like, I wish I was not born. Like, why am I living? Like, why am I even here on this earth? Not necessarily his exact words, but something like that. And so when Jeremiah says those things, then there's a very interesting response that God gives. But let me give some context. Jeremiah was called to prophesy to Israel that they were going to be exiled to Babylon. So really, Jeremiah is telling Israel all the things that they do not want to hear. He's telling them, you got to get your act together. You have to, like, this is like the judgment coming from the Lord. And it is something that you're not going to be able to, like, overcome, or, you know, or do whatever. So you're going to be exiled to your enemy's land. And so no one wanted to hear this, obviously. And so everybody rejected the message from Jeremiah. Everybody rejected Jeremiah, especially like the leaders of Israel at that time. And so that's why really got Jeremiah to the point where he's like, I don't want to live anymore. Or I wish I wasn't alive. Or I wish I wasn't even born. Something like that. And so then the words that God tells him, then I find in Jeremiah 15:19, and it is when God says, but if you speak good words rather than worthless ones, you will be my spokesman. And that was really interesting to me, and that's the principle that I took to heart. And that is that in the midst of whatever situation, no matter what it is that might be going through, if I speak good words, if I speak words of blessing, of encouragement, positive words, then I can be like a spokesman of God. Like, I can be a mouthpiece. If I will ever dream of being a mouthpiece in the kingdom of God, then I have to be very cautious and very careful with what I say. And that specifically and especially includes moments of trials, moments of frustration, moments of failure. Like, those are the times where we have to be most guarded with what we say. Yes, you need to vent, and yes, you need to let off steam, but you have to be very selective with who you could do that. And you have to find a very small group of people that you can trust and be open and be vulnerable with. But make sure that those people are people that can speak life into you, that can really speak into your identity, that they know your life's purpose, that they can really reaffirm things that are within your life's calling or purpose. And so that's exactly one of the things that I learned in the midst of my failure. It was, if I'm ever going to talk about these things, I want to make sure that I do it in a positive way, or I do it in a way that is constructive. So that was really my objective in recording that episode. And finally, one of the things that you're going to find when you listen to the episode will be how there's one particular exercise technique that really helped me on how to overcome the failure and like resigning from my absolute dream job. And so I hope that you listen to it and you get some good insights from it. But if you find yourself that you're like, I don't know who to talk to, who will even begin to understand what it is that I may be going through, and anything that I've said has resonated, or even after listening to the episode, you find that you're like, hey, there's some things that we can connect on, feel free to reach out. I'm literally a message away, and I would love to connect with you. So make sure that you listen to episode 5 of proFAITHsional Favor on how to overcome your personal failures and mistakes at work. And hopefully I'll connect with you in another video. Bye-bye.